Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Shafron Hawkins here with me today. How you doing, Shay?
I'm doing great, Cedric. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Where are you located in your central offices today?
I'm in one of the satellite offices, one of the victory centers here.
Okay.
And, just working hard. We're using every minute we got.
Absolutely.
These days, yeah.
You look like a familiar face. I gotta say that.
No question. Well, I've been around town for some time now.
Yep.
So we probably crossed paths even before this.
Absolutely. Would you consider yourself to be a man of the people?
Yeah. I think so. This. As we'll talk about. This community is really given me a lot. And so I want to use a lot of my experience and a lot of my education to give back to the community that kind of built me,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what community are you talking about?
So I was born in the city of Cleveland. I was raised in Cleveland Heights. And now I live one neighborhood away in Lyndhurst.
Nice.
Yes, sir.
Nice. For those of you who might not know, I'm also from Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm honored to be having this conversation with you. Now, can you talk to us about your Cleveland, Ohio? What was it like for you growing up in Cleveland? What did it feel like, and what era are we talking?
Oh, we are talking growing up in the. I was born in, let's say, 1974.
Okay.
We're talking about really growing up in the 80s.
Okay, right.
In Cleveland, and it was interesting. Cleveland Heights at the time was heralded. You saw articles in USA Today and across country as one of the most successfully integrated suburbs in the country.
Really?
And so, yeah, they highlighted Cleveland Heights and they highlighted Shaker Heights. And one of the interesting facts that may have been a contributor or just an interesting fact associated with it is that the Black residents of Cleveland Heights, on average, had a slightly higher income than the white residents of Cleveland Heights. Just on average, and so it ended up being a really interesting, an interesting place to grow up. Mm-hmm. Very integrated. Very large Jewish community, so large, in fact, that we would get out of school on Tuesday every day an hour early because we had so many of our students that were going to Hebrew school on Tuesdays. And so just an interesting neighborhood and a kind of a rich cultural environment.
Absolutely. What was your family like for you growing up? Were there multiple siblings? What was your household like?
Yeah. So I was blessed, to grow up with, two parents who loved each other and loved us, And so I had one brother, older, and two older sisters. So I was the youngest.
Okay. Now, yeah. Did you get the youngest sibling treatment? Were you always
100%
up the rear trying to tag along with everybody else?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was tough, man. My brother used to have this thing where he would just out of nowhere yell 44 Magnum.
Okay.
He'd pin me down and with both fists punch me in my chest.
Uh-huh.
It was tough, man. Tough. Got that treatment, got the swung around by your feet treatment, got the
right.
Make you drink your dad's cologne, your brother making you drink your dad's treatment.
Right.
It was rough.
You know what? I am an oldest sibling. I'm the oldest of my brothers and sisters, and so I can definitely say, as a big brother, we do stuff like that, trying to make you tough. Like, yeah, my little brother's gonna be real tough when I get done with him.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, and back when I was younger, wrestling was really popular. So it was not uncommon, for your brother to put you in a sharpshooter or DDT you You know,
Complex.
yeah, jumping off the bed, you calling it off the ropes, you know, clotheslining you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm familiar. Good times, man. Good
Yeah,
times.
yeah. But no, it was great. You know, went to Boulevard Elementary. That was kind of a what was known as a magnet school. So really enjoyed that. You know, that was walking distance from my house. And middle school at Monticello Middle School, and then I did my high school at Cleveland Heights. So you know, did music in all through junior high at school. Played drums, was a pretty strong drummer there in the jazz band and whatnot. And when I went to high school, I had focused more on sports.
Okay.
So I ran track my freshman year only, where I pole vaulted and did the 800 meter relay. But my major sport was wrestling.
Really?
And so, yeah, wrestled all 4 years. Was all state my senior year and was seen. So that helped shape a lot of my character as well.
Sure.
You know, probably during those high school years, the two main influences on me were probably my dad, but then also my wrestling coach second, you know, Coach Larry Hoon.
Would you say wrestling was one of the toughest things you ever did in your life?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's a tough sport. You know, our coach, Larry Hoon, he's kind of a legend around Cleveland Heights. He had this thing called Hoon's Platoon, you know, and it was sort of an elite group, physically elite group within the 80 or so people who'd be on the wrestling team, where you go through a series of kind of physical tasks, and then you end up, you know, with your name on a board. That was Hoon's Platoon. And, you know, some of those tasks were things that you were used to. You know, you run a certain amount, do a certain amount of push-ups, you know, climb a certain, you know, a rope in a certain amount of time. But other stuff was stuff that I was completely out of my wheelhouse. Like we had to swim a mile.
Oh yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, and I was not a great swimmer at the time, and so that it was, you know,
Yeah, you know,
it was something.
I personally believe that 17-year-olds are constantly taking the mantle of the future of the world.
Yeah.
At 17 years old, you are up to some very competitive challenges. Like you said, you had a coach who was expecting you to be able to swim a mile. You know, Now I want everybody out there to take a look around your public and figure out who among you can swim a mile right now. Right. But 17-year-olds clear across the country are competing in challenges like those. I think 17-year-olds are definitely among America's next motivators. Now, can you talk to me about the influence that sports played on you as a perspective? What did sports do for you?
Oh yeah, well, you know, it's two things. One, it helped me develop a sense of discipline, right? So that's key, because you're having to discipline yourself towards a very tangible goal. You know, with wrestling, you know, it was week to week, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it wasn't just the match. You know, in wrestling teams that are large, there's only about 13 slots, and so whereas the team is, you know, could be 80, 90 people. So each week you have what's called a wrestle off, where you compete for your slot by going man to man against all the other people who are in your weight class on your team, you know.
Right.
And so, you know, that's something that you're preparing for all week, and you're you know, you're working with that wrestler, you know, that competing person or people all through that week, you know.
Sure.
And so, you know, you develop a discipline, but it even helped me develop a discipline outside the classroom. I can remember my sophomore year of high school, my grades really dropped.
Why?
And it put the possibility
Hold up.
of me.
Can you talk about why your grades dropped?
I was heavily distracted at that time.
Okay.
Call it a combination of
You were an athlete.
I was an athlete.
You were an athlete. So
I was an athlete, and I was a good athlete.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of development I had to do. So I'll give you an example. I mentioned the situation with the wrestle off, right?
Yep.
And so I was in an odd situation where, because of my athletic ability, I was actually able to beat all of the wrestlers who were in front of me, including one person who was a senior, where it would have been his turn to start varsity in that weight class, right?
Yep.
But I wasn't a well enough developed wrestler to know everything he was doing when he actually got out there competing with varsity level people from other schools.
Mm-hmm.
So what would happen, I would beat our best people in the 103 weight class internally, and then go to the match and get pinned.
Right.
Pinning costs your team 6 points.
Right.
A technical fall costs your team 5 points. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you just lose normally by points, then you cost your team 3 points. Mm-hmm. So I was in an odd situation where there was nothing anybody could do to stop me from starting varsity, because it's just an objective one-on-one process. But I was actually costing the team dearly when I actually got to the match. And so that resulted in a lot of sort of shunning and being ostracized by the other seniors and juniors who were the varsity wrestlers in the other weight classes. Mm-hmm. And so much so till, after practice, I wouldn't even shower. I would just go home, not even change my wrestling shoes.
Right.
I didn't change my wrestling shoes. I just walk right home,
Yeah.
And so no boots, no nothing. Just walk home.
Right. Now it sounds like a parable right now that you are extremely talented, and yet you got so much to learn.
So much to learn. And so, I was really focused on learning that. And it was ironic because right as I was really getting good, and thereby performing well in matches, thereby gaining the acceptance of my teammates, the grades dropped, which jeopardized me continuing to wrestle.
Right. Yeah.
And so I had to get focused. And in the second semester of my sophomore year, I had the best grades that I had in all of high school. So I went from having the worst grades my first semester to having the best grades in my second semester, and really getting that turned around. And so, again, there was a lot to learn, but you just had to be focused, disciplined, and put the work in.
There are people who are kind of shunning sports right now with all the things that we are up against as a community. How do we remain competitive in a global society? Some people are losing respect for sports. What do you think about that?
I think sports are critical because not only did I learn discipline, but I also learned teamwork and cooperation. So wrestling can be viewed as an individual sport, but you compete on a team. They add those points up, and either Cleveland Heights loses or Cleveland Heights wins, And during the week, even though some of the people you're competing against for a spot, ultimately you want Cleveland Heights to do well, and you work together in that goal, towards that goal of making sure that you and your teammates are as good as you can be. And so that's critical for, Americans, for our community to be competitive globally, right?
Yeah.
We have to know how to cooperate. That's what free enterprise is all about. It's about voluntary cooperation of people who are bringing everything that they have, their best, to the table, if you will.
Okay.
And sports personifies that. And another thing that's critical about sports is that your success is measured objectively. Okay. Meaning, in football, either you get the yards or you don't.
Right.
That's it. There's no vagueness to it. There's no subjectivity to it. Either you get them or you don't. There's a referee there, and all he does is, determines whether you made it or not. In baseball, that referee's calling balls and strikes, period.
Right.
Okay. And so that's what's really key, is that sports can be a metaphor for the other critical, important areas of our lives.
Okay. Do you have any ideas of how young people who might not be into sports can also become mentally and socially fit?
Well, man, I think there's there's a few ways to get the same skill set. One is working a job, right? So so in high school, when I wasn't doing sports, I was working, from 13 up. And so again, you're there, you're learning about entrepreneurship, you're learning about being on time, about being dependable, about about doing those jobs and getting those jobs done that other people are avoiding, So that's going to be critical. And then there's also forms of competition that are not physical necessarily, but that are intellectual. So, folks can get on a debate team, which I did that in college. Folks can also get on a chess club, right?
Right. Yep.
You can learn those skills because, the principles are really the same, right?
Yep.
Just like all work is not necessarily physical, all competition isn't physical either.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
I think you made a great point when you said that sports, just as well as your first job or your role on a chess team or debate team, these are all metaphorical things that you get into. I think that was a very powerful point. What was your first job?
My first job was selling hot dogs at the old Cleveland Indians Stadium. So years and years ago, they used the same stadium for here in Cleveland for football games and for baseball games.
Okay.
They would just change the field around. So I was at the old stadium, and they had these big vats full of water. You have the hot dogs on one and the buns on the other and all the fixings. And you got to carry those up and down the stands, man.
Right.
And sell those hot dogs. So I was doing that when I was 13. That was my first job.
Those hot dogs are some of the best hot dogs you ever had in your life, weren't they? Yeah. Hey, when you get, I guess you could say, to a different palate as far as the things you eat, you look over and you say, I'm not eating that hot dog. But hey, have you ever been hungry, or even back in the day when it was a thing to do? Those hot dogs, some of the best hot dogs you ever had in your life.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And so you were in those stands, huh?
I was in the stands.
Yeah.
Going up and down, people call for one. You gotta,
yeah,
get up there.
Were you ever working your job during a legendary game, or any legendary hits, or any legendary plays you were there for?
I wasn't, because the next year when I went to work, I worked in the actually in one of the concession stands. you know,
Okay, yeah.
so we couldn't see the games. And then it was just those 2 years that I was in the stadium. After that, I was a custodian at my church, and then over a summer, and then from there, I was a dishwasher at Denny's, and
Mm-hmm.
I was a host at Denny's.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of continued on from there.
Yeah, these jobs, they teach you so much. They teach you so much things you would never imagine that you would learn from an entry-level job.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
everywhere I lived, there was a mother who was always washing dishes, and you got a lot of different styles of washing dishes. Some women or some fathers they put bleach in the water. Some people have a 3-part process. But washing dishes was something that would usually take you about, maybe an hour tops. I got a job at a Chipotle one time, and it was a dishwashing job. So I'm thinking, listen, I've been watching people wash dishes, for years. It's a piece of cake, So I get there, and they say, yeah, so this is where you're gonna be washing dishes. So I'm looking around for the dishes. I see the pots. I see the large metal pots and the huge metal pans, about 200-300 of them. So I'm like, I'm seeing all the pots and pans, but where are the dishes at? And it was like, no, those are the dishes. Those huge pots and pans are the dishes.
Yes.
Lo and behold, this wasn't your ordinary dishwashing job. You had to scrub about 200 or 300 metal pans and pots every single day. And so I gained so much respect for people who do entry-level work.
Yes, sir.
That entry-level job really taught me what work was about. Work being 300 or 400 dishes.
Yeah.
And you're responsible for an assembly line. You got to get those dishes back out there so that they can serve more food. And so, all these foundational occupations give you the understanding of what hard work is.
Yes.
Do you think that we need more conversations and more accountability around hard work in our communities?
Yeah, absolutely. It's critical because that's going to be, the foundation of everything. I can remember when I was very young, reading Ben Carson's book.
Mm-hmm.
And what he talked about the fact that his mother could not read, beyond, I think she didn't go beyond an 8th grade education or something like that. But she insisted that he and his brother read a book a week, over the summer. And so it wasn't so much that she had a certain intellectual capacity. It was that she had a work ethic, right? That she passed down, or I should say instilled, in her sons. And once you have the work ethic built, you can apply it to anything. Right. You can apply it to physical work. You can apply it to intellectual work, But that mentality of saying, look, all work is a creative activity, all work is valuable, and all work is beneficial to you in and of itself. I think that's critical.
Absolutely. And did community service play a role in your foundation of what work is?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I was active, very active in my local church growing up. And, a lot of that involved, what was basically service to others. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, from the standpoint of the leaders in my church and from my parents, that work that we do to serve others is no less important and no less part of what we were put here to do than the work that we would do, as an entrepreneur, or the work we would do for our bosses.
Sure.
Serving those people as Christ told us to serve the poor, was no less important. So yeah, community service is critical. It's a critical part of it.
Absolutely. At what point in your life were you sure that you were prepared to get out into the world and do some work? Like when was the moment in your life where you felt like, you know what, I got some tools under my belt?
Yeah. So, I think I would have really felt comfortable in that regard at age 23.
Okay.
I had come out of college. I had an economics degree. And, economics can be a little vague,
Mm-hmm.
But what I had done is I went out and got linked up with a financial firm, and the firm sponsored me for a test called the Series 7.
Okay.
What the Series 7 does is it allows you to legally trade stocks and bonds, right?
Yep.
And so it's a license, and it puts you in a category where you can do something. You take this test, and now if you pass it, you can do something that, the other 99.9% of the population is not allowed to do.
Right.
And so it puts a floor under your employment prospects because you have this license that's needed to do this job. And so having that kind of trade license, being officially licensed in a trade, made me feel like I was ready to get out there and make a contribution. I was ready to get it done.
So you passed that test?
I passed it. I got 80%. Now at the job I was at, if you fail, they fire you.
Right.
It was a little bit of high pressure there.
Right.
But yeah. I was a little bit of high pressure, but no, having it was a big point of pride,
Right. Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Shafron Hawkins. He is a very powerful man. He is a knowledgeable man, and he has the firsthand experiences to speak toward that. That's the conversation that we're having today, but we're not finished. I want you to tag along because we'll be right back with more from Shay Hawkins. America's Next Motivator, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by me, Cedric Riley, and sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network. And we're back. How you feeling out there, Shay?
Feeling great.
That's good. Hey, everybody, I see y'all out there in the audience. Feel free to drop some questions, drop some comments, because I'm really enjoying our conversation, and I appreciate you being here. Now, before we went to the break, Shay, you said that you went to college. What college did you go to?
I went to the Ohio State University.
Wow. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.
Yeah. OH.
IO.
That's right. That's right. Shout out to all the Buckeyes out there in the whole wide universe. I'm happy to know that you went to Ohio State University. And you said that when you took economics, you said that it was very vague. Now, I took economics for a little while, and to me, it was very specific, and to me, it was everything was upside down. Nothing meant what I thought it was supposed to mean, and it just showed me how much I didn't understand about the world. What would you say about economics?
So right. So when I said it was vague, I meant that the specific jobs you're supposed to take, the job prospects were vague. Meaning, if you're an accounting major, it's pretty clear that you're meant to be an accountant, right?
Yeah.
If you're a marketing major, it's pretty, economics is a little broader in that sense. That's all I meant.
Right.
Now, I loved economics. It helped me develop a lot of my worldview because economics more than anything, it talks about how society divides up scarce resources. And it helps you determine the most efficient ways to divide those up. And in determining that, you learn a lot about human nature.
Wow.
And how people consume products, but really, how people consume anything. It could be government services, it could be products, it could be anything that makes people just marginally more happy than they were the moment before.
Right.
When I take a drink of this this soda here, that first sip might be worth a lot to me,
Right.
But if I'm sitting drinking it all day, at some point, the utility of that next sip drops off
Right.
significantly.
Right.
And so, it's the same thing with products, So understanding, what makes people happy, what they're willing to give up in order to have that thing that makes them happy, it's just fascinating.
Do you think that our experts out there in the world, you being one of them, is always trying to figure out how to make us okay, how to make us happy with taking another sip?
Well, a lot of the, I can tell you that the folks marketing the soda are
right.
definitely thinking in those terms. But no, I mean, we see it all around us. I mean, even, we see it on social media, right?
Yep.
I mean, at the end of the day, every time a post or a picture or a comment gets a like, on a Twitter or a Facebook or an Instagram or whatever, there's a little endorphin, there's a little bit of pleasure that comes from that, right? Mm-hmm. And so what the folks at these social media companies are selling is that feeling, that approval, that
gratification.
That gratification.
Right.
And so yeah, it really is all around us.
For sure. Can you offer some tips to young men and women across the world who might be studying economics? They might be studying something else, but they're on college campuses right now, and it's tough for them. They've been dealing with COVID, the pandemic, and still trying to achieve high. Can you provide some tips for them today?
Oh, yeah. What I say is that you got to keep moving. You got to keep moving because there have been people who have had to study and had to learn and had to prepare themselves to be contributors to society under much more difficult circumstances.
Give us an example.
So one would be, this country's Great Depression, right? Okay. Another would be, I went to Ohio State, a school with 4,500 undergraduates and 15,000 graduate students at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to go there with 5,000 other African Americans. Okay.
Really?
There was a time, where you would have almost been alone, right?
Yeah.
So imagine studying and trying to get by under those circumstances, right?
Right. Yeah.
When you're the first Black economics major, when you're the first Black person in the law school, when you're the first Black person in an engineering program, right? So, when you look at that, and look at the circumstances that people have had to deal with in the past, us having to deal with a little bit of remote learning during COVID is not that much.
Okay.
We got to push through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now, what did you do after college? What was your next endeavor?
So my next endeavor after college, I went out to New York, and I volunteered actually on a fellowship program at Columbia University. And so what was good is that folks in New York and across the country have great respect for Columbia. And so because I was volunteering on that fellowship, Columbia was now on my resume.
Okay.
So I had Ohio State on my resume, which was great. I had Columbia on my resume, which was great. And I started applying for jobs. So I ended up at a brokerage house. At the time, it was called Waterhouse Securities. Now it's part of another bank. And there, I joined their team, and I had 6 months where I had to work on what they call a quote desk, which was kind of like the entry level position there. And you worked there for 6 months while you prepared to take your Series 7.
Okay.
Which was that license I mentioned in the earlier segment, that allows you to trade stocks and bonds. And so it was tough work. It was, a lot of hours, but it was designed for you to learn a lot,
Right. Yeah.
which I did. A lot of information got jammed into those 12 hours a day.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Now, a lot of people are getting into what seems to be the trades market, whether it be through Forex or just flat out stocks and bonds.
Yeah.
But you had to take a sophisticated test in order to really get into that market effectively. It is what you were doing after you took that Series 7 test the same thing that people are doing these days, where they could just arbitrarily get into the trade stocks and market?
Yeah. Well, the difference is that the test allows you to do it for other people, right? So, in our current environment, I can get into Forex trading for myself, but if you're going to do it for other people and take a commission, then you need to be licensed, because it has to be clear that you're, giving people, reasonable advice, that you fully understand the markets, and that you can fully communicate what's happening with those investments to your customers or clients.
Okay. All right. So now, when did you first start getting into leadership positions in the state of Ohio?
Yes. So I worked in finance for about 3 years, and then went back to business school in New York. I went to Columbia Business School for my MBA.
Okay.
So after that, I actually came back to Cleveland, initially to take a shot at a Cleveland City Council seat. I lost in the primary by 102 votes, which is pretty close. When I'm in Cleveland, I see 102 votes down every street.
Right.
Can I go down there?
Right.
But I said that I would. I said that I would continue to volunteer and serve my community for at least the time that I would have been a councilman.
Right. Okay.
So that involved a few things. That involved volunteering on our county transition. We had a very deep county corruption scandal where 140 local elected officials and business owners and things were indicted.
Wow.
And so it was pretty bad. But the result of it was that we changed the form of our county government from the system we had before with 3 commissioners and a number of elected positions to a county council and 1 county executive, which is what we have now.
Okay.
And the point is, we had to transition to that system. And, there had to be a charter section developed for each element of the new government. So I volunteered on the transition project and charter project for finance and for budget. And so, I volunteered with a number of other leaders in the community, and we came up with a series of 21 recommendations for the charter, and about 20 of those 20 out of 21 were accepted by the Charter Commission and helped to form our new government. So I started off, in leadership really, but just by volunteering with other leaders. I also, at that same time, began teaching economics as an instructor at Cuyahoga Community College, which is the largest community college here in Ohio. And I had students from age 16, folks who were still in high school, but who were taking college level classes, up to age 60, people who were going back and transitioning into a new career.
Sure.
And so, we were just using any means at my disposal based on my background to make a contribution to the community,
right?
During that time.
I think it's very admirable that even though you didn't win the seat that you originally ran for, you decided to commit to service to the community anyway. I think that's great. So you pretty much decided that one way or another you were going to become a civil servant.
I was going to become a contributor, absolutely. Yeah.
Who or what convinced you that was part of your calling in life?
Well, again, this community give me so much, and I felt the need to give back, and public policy and the political process was something that I found very attractive. And so I felt like this was something that I was kind of built for and meant to do.
Okay. And what is it that ordinary people, or maybe not so ordinary, but a lot of people need to understand about folks who run for offices in our city and our need to get out there and vote at the local level?
Yeah, well, I think that's critical in that the person who's your local state representative or your local city councilman, your mayor, all of these people have a much greater impact on your life than people in Washington, D.C.
Can you explain to me how the local congressional seats impact the lives of ordinary civilians, people like myself and my family? Tell us how these.
Absolutely. So, so one key issue, one that stands out in an obvious way, is that there's been a lot of concern about police interactions with the community, right? And so, you can take the situation with George Floyd, okay?
Yes.
And so, so that occurs, and people's instinct was to demand federal action,
Right.
And, and we saw that, we saw, President Trump did his executive order. We saw Senator Scott, drop the Justice Act, which, had a number of significant police reforms. We saw the Democratic controlled House of Representatives put their Justice for George Floyd Act together, which also had a number of, key reforms, right?
Right.
So you saw that federal action, but the reality is that the city of Minneapolis, that city council, that mayor, they hired the police chief. They hired the police officer that killed George Floyd.
Right.
They structured the rules that say whether or not you can use a chokehold, whether or not you're allowed to put your knee on somebody's neck, whether or not you're allowed to proceed in these ways. Okay. All of those were rules that are local.
Okay.
this man had been in trouble before, right? And the local county prosecutor for the area that includes, Minneapolis, she's now a senator, Senator Klobuchar, chose not to prosecute the man, So what Senator Klobuchar is doing now as a senator is much less important than what she chose not to do when she was a local prosecutor, right?
Okay.
So, so people have to hold their local governments accountable because those are the people who are going to affect them.
Right. So what I hear you saying is that we all want what's best for ourselves and our families and our communities, but it's not always just the president or the highest seat that we need to be connecting to our individual streets. It's actually a whole lot of people that we need to understand runs our locality, and they run. When you take a step out into the middle of the street and do a 360, there's a lot of people that run that 360 that you need to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And all of them work for you.
Okay.
They work for you. It's not their tax money, it's your tax money.
Right.
It's not, it's not the laws they come up with, it's the laws that you tell them to write.
Mm-hmm. The reason why I painted the picture that way is because a lot of young men and women, they think that managing their life is managing your checkbook, managing your refrigerator, managing your children, managing your career, and managing your children, if that be the case.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting out of this conversation is that managing your life also consists of being a part of managing your community by voting locally.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not enough. It's not enough to do all your business and vote for the presidency. You're missing a step if you're not voting for the people who run your life locally.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
And holding those people accountable.
Mm-hmm. How do we keep up with who these people are? How do we find out who the relevant people are? How do we keep up with who they are? For instance, sometimes you'll hear somebody saying, somebody might be saying, you know what? I know this guy. His name is Shafron Hawkins, and he's running for District 6 here in Ohio. How would somebody know about you to say, oh, okay, yeah, I should vote for him? How do we find out who these seats are, these people, these roles are, and how do we get to know these people who are running for these seats?
Well, there's extensive information available at your local county board of elections. Okay. So from the time I decided to run, right, mm-hmm. I had to go and they call it pulling petitions, meaning you just put your name on a list and you take the petitions to go door to door to try to get on the ballot. From the time I attempted to get on the ballot, there was a public record.
Okay.
That was created that says Shay Hawkins is thinking about running for office. Mm-hmm. And so in each step, as I got closer and closer to being someone that people could vote for, there was more information available, at the Board of Elections about me,
Okay.
Where I lived, where I've worked, those types of things. Mm-hmm. And then as a candidate for office, I have every incentive to let people know, to let people know everything about me and everything about what I want to do to make their lives better. So both me and my opponent, I will really talk to anybody who will listen.
Right.
The problem is that a lot of people aren't really interested. Again, if it's not a politician they see on TV.
Sure. And that's the reason why I'm trying to establish here in this conversation that understanding local politics and the people who are filling those seats is part of your responsibility of being an adult.
Yes.
And I'm trying to figure out, how do we learn to become responsible in that way? Because it's something that we need to learn. We need to learn how to become responsible for local politics. And like you said, if we don't see people on the news and we don't see them on our local stations, then there's a missing piece of information that we need to know in order to access who's out there and what's going on.
Yeah, and one of the things that I plan to do is to have regular town halls.
Okay.
So these are going to be regular meetings where it's different than campaigning. A lot of time when you're campaigning, you tend to ignore the people who you know for sure are going to vote for you, and you tend to ignore the people who you're sure won't vote for you. But once you're elected, now you're everybody's representative, right? Whether they voted for you or not. Mm-hmm. And so I plan to have regular town halls to make myself accessible to the people so they can ask me what's going on, so I can communicate what's happening down in Columbus.
Right. Have we lost?
And just to get it in perspective, when I did my endorsement interview with my opponent, he bragged about the number of town halls he had done. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
What I'm saying for the purpose of this show is that, I plan to be more accessible than him, but even he was trying to be very accessible himself, if that makes sense. Absolutely. So, if people make the effort to look into it just a little bit, then, they'll find that there's town halls that they can attend where they can hear about what's going on with their government.
Absolutely. So you are running for
state representative.
Okay.
In District 6. So Ohio's House of Representatives, you can look at it like Congress, but on the state level. So if Governor DeWine, you could look at him as being in the same place as President Trump in a sense. Mm-hmm. And then you could look at me as being in the same place as a congressman in a sense, as we make laws that affect Ohio.
Okay.
So there's 99 people in the House of Representatives here. Every representative has about 130,000 constituents.
Okay.
And then there are 33 senators. Every senator has about between 350 and 390 constituents. Basically, 3 House districts make up 1 Senate district.
Okay.
And so, and then we all make the laws, and then the governor enforces the laws.
Okay.
And then the court system in Ohio, which has, the first level is the Court of Common Pleas. The next level is the Ohio Court of Appeals, and then there's the Ohio Supreme Court. They interpret the laws.
Okay. Wow. And real quick, what is it that you intend to do if and when you get what you achieve, what you set out to get?
Yes. So I am running in order to help Ohio's entrepreneurs create jobs. There are a lot of problems that can be solved with a good job, problems that affect all of us. And my goal is that every Northeast Ohioan who has the ability to work has the opportunity to work. So helping entrepreneurs create jobs is going to mean making sure that they're protected and their workers are protected from COVID-related lawsuits. So this is to say, if they're doing everything they're supposed to do, then, in terms of keeping people safe, then they should be protected from lawsuits, because if people are going to be sued for running their business, nobody's going to open back up. So that's number one. Number two is we want to make sure that we keep the taxes on small business owners and the workers as low as possible. Number three, we want to make sure that that the regulations that are in place are regulations that are actually there to keep people safe or to keep people from being defrauded. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't keep people safe and it doesn't keep people from being defrauded, then we don't want that regulation in place. We want that removed, because that's an impediment to progress there.
Absolutely.
And so the last thing that we can do, to really help is we have to make sure that our neighborhoods are safe. Safe neighborhoods are critical. Only a safe neighborhood will attract capital.
Okay.
And attracting that capital is critical for the investment that creates jobs. Okay. So we have to keep our neighborhoods safe. We have to make sure that our police forces have the resources they need to be trained, properly trained, to police citizens in a way that's, consistent with, with the laws and the rules that we put down, but that also, creates an environment where people can do business and live and work.
Absolutely. I understand that you get passionate when you start talking about the value that you're going to add to the people that you serve. And I think that that is highly respectable. I want to let you know that I've listened to your story today.
Yes,
I've listened to how you overcame adversity, how you were extremely competitive. You've taken lessons and converted them into habits that you do on a daily basis. And I think that's great. I want to give you a crown today while you're still living. So everybody out there in the audience, get your crown emojis ready. And I want to give you your respect while you can still acknowledge it. I want to let you know, Shafron Hawkins, that you are America's next motivator.
Thanks, Cedric.
You're very welcome. Thanks for stopping by, all right?
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Each and every episode of America's Next Motivator is going to have something here for you. All you've got to do is stop by and pick it up.